We've been talking about yesterday's pro-police rally, Colorado, that took place in Civic Center Park in downtown Denver, just blocks from the capital of the city, rather the state of Colorado. And it was really something. We've been showing a lot of footage about what happened. We'll be putting some more up, but I am so pleased to finally have with us here on the program the sheriff for Weld County in northern Colorado, Steve Reams, who is a true patriot and was there yesterday to show support for his fellow law enforcement officers, even as Law Enforcement Appreciation Day was rudely and violently interrupted by thugs. Sheriff Reams, welcome to the show. It's good to have you, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Jimmy. I wish it was under better circumstances than talking about a failed event.
Me too. And I appreciate you coming on and bearing with us through some of these technical problems. So you are a law enforcement officer. You are a sheriff of a county. You hope to continue to be a sheriff of that county after November. From your vantage point, sir, what went down yesterday?
Well, yesterday was an absolute failure on the Denver Police Department's ability to plan to provide a safe venue for a permitted rally that was actually designed to support them and all other law enforcement officers in the state of Colorado. As you well know, this was the 6th annual Law Enforcement Appreciation event. The organizers of the event had gone through the correct process to get it permitted with the city of Denver. They had the venue reserved, and the Denver Police Department was well aware of what was taking place. They were also well aware of the measures that the protesters were taking. It's unfortunate that the Denver Police Department, knowing that we had an event scheduled and knowing that protesters were planning to ruin the event, didn't take any affirmative action to try to create a zone that would stop the rioters, the protesters from coming and invading our event. And ultimately, that's what they ended up doing. They took over the event, and they were trying to incite violence. They got what they were asking for a couple of times, and ultimately they ruined the event that was there to honor the police across the state of Colorado, the Denver police, and the Denver police, in all fairness, stood by and let it happen.
Now, they stood by and let it happen. Why? Why was that? Because it seems to be it was not the police making a determination right then and there. Hey, you know what? Why don't we not intervene and protect people? But it came down from the chief, who probably got it from the mayor.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious. I talked with several of the Denver officers that were there. Without naming names, they were just as frustrated as anybody at the rules of engagement that were provided to them by their leadership, if you want to use that term. And there's also a factor that I don't know if it's been mentioned, but recently in Colorado, Senate Bill 217 was passed that really changes the rules of engagement for law enforcement officers, and it makes it very difficult to control a riot, which honestly, that's what happened. We had a riot breakout yesterday, and the officers were kind of on their heels for what they could or couldn't do, and that became glaringly apparent.
Yeah, again, we're talking with Steve Reams, sheriff for Weld County, Colorado, which is in northern Colorado. And when we look at what happened yesterday, I've been making this point with every guest, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this, Sheriff Reams. And that is, look, the reality of the situation is that they could not have done this and would not have done this if they didn't think that they could get away with it. It was so brazen and so disgusting, yet they did it anyway. Normally, you have two separate gatherings, a protest and a counter-protest, or a rally and a protest of that rally, and they are separated from some distance. They didn't even try to do some sort of separation for themselves. Instead, they said, well, we're just going to go mess things up.
Yeah, that's to the point I was making earlier. The Denver Police Department had every pre-warning that there was going to be a crowd that was going to come in and try to overtake our event. They had all the ability to establish a zone between the two groups if they had chosen to, or if they had been allowed to. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and I think you're correct. The protesters, the Antifa folks, whatever label you want to give them, they're figuring out the rules for engagement, and they're actually now starting to define those rules for the Denver Police Department. Instead of Denver being proactive, they're being completely reactive. They're not allowed to take any measures that would help ensure safety. So by that factor alone, the folks that are down there causing lawlessness and anarchy are doing just that. They're getting better and better at it, and they're causing more and more problems. And yesterday was a glaring example of how the police department are basically on roller skates. They have no way to affirmatively go out and deal with stuff, and that's by policy, by law, and just by the mere factor of the fact that they're outnumbered. There's more lawless protesters down there than anyone else.
Sheriff Steve Reams, looking as a law enforcement officer, as a sheriff in the county, I mean, if this was in Weld County, you would have had to handle it for a lot of parts of the county. What do you think should have been the rules of engagement? What should have been set up in terms of some sort of a barrier to keep the two events separate, as opposed to allowing one to literally invade in a mass swarm the other?
Well, it's just that. I think you have to set up zones around the facility. You have to create a perimeter with law enforcement officers, and you have to create ingress and egress points so that you can control the flow of individuals in and out. Every law enforcement agency of any size knows how to accomplish these things. I'm sure Denver's well aware of it. They provide policing services to all the major athletic events, so this should have been a walk in the park for them. Again, though, it's a matter of whether or not they're given the authority to engage the way they're supposed to, and I think that's the part that was missing yesterday. When you have a permitted rally that the city and was well aware of, it seems as if the appropriate precautionary measures should have been taken, and they just flat out weren't allowed to. We all know that the Denver Police Department was trying to discourage this rally from taking place for whatever reason. So I think they felt the way to end the rally was just to allow Antifa to do what they wanted to do, and basically caused us to have to end the event.
Sheriff Steve Reams, that's the thing that I have not wanted to think about, but I have, and that is that this was something that they just, top brass, Randy Corcoran earlier said this wasn't a blue problem, this was a brass problem. I think he's right on the top brass. The thought that they might have wanted to just let this happen. That's hard to believe, but the thought has absolutely occurred to me given the dynamics here. I understand that they didn't want it to happen, but the rally went on nonetheless, and they didn't put into place any sort of appropriate preventative measures, which can be done and have been done many times in the past.
Well, I think you're correct. This was a brass problem. There's no doubt in my mind by the messaging they were giving to the event organizer that they knew we were potentially going to face a violent encounter. Therefore, they knew they could face a violent encounter. And I think the thought process was, that'll scare off this rally. And when people showed up anyways, there was the last minute text messages and phone calls telling us to beware that Antifa was coming. But that was the most proactive thing that they did to try to protect the group, was just to tell us that they were coming, like we couldn't hear them a block away. But unfortunately, like we've said several times here, the Denver Police Department wasn't allowed to engage in a meaningful way. And unfortunately, some people got into a few fistfights, or a few people that got injured. And this is not the way in which this rally should have gone. This should have been to promote the Denver Police Department. I think, honestly, what they did was made more people dislike the way that they're doing business.
Well, I certainly hope that message gets across, because, Sheriff Reams, this is not just a Denver problem. This is a national problem. We're seeing riots break out again in Seattle, Washington, and the unrest is continuing in many cities around the nation, where police just feel like their hands are absolutely tied. If they do the things that they're trained to do, they can get in trouble for it. I'm not talking about the excesses. There are things that definitely need to be addressed, I think, in terms of how police operate. But the rules of engagement here, to use the military term, the rules of engagement are just so restrictive that you cannot do your job. And it is not just a Denver problem. It's not just happening here in Colorado. It is happening across the country in all sorts of circumstances. This is just, I think, maybe one of the first instances, maybe not, I haven't heard of others, but where they've actually said, hey, we're going to disrupt a peaceful, law-abiding, permitted gathering, as opposed to let's go burn buildings, buildings and riot and that kind of thing.
Well, that's absolutely the case here in Colorado. And like I talked about just a little bit ago, Senate Bill 217 in the state of Colorado has legislated many of the things that we saw yesterday when cops can't engage to deal with a riot because a lot of the tools that they would normally use are no longer available to them. That creates a problem. And then as you use the rules of engagement for using force against a rioter or any person, the only way in which a law enforcement officer can use force against someone under current law is if they're going to affect an arrest. Now, again, if a perimeter had been put up yesterday and the permitting process had been adhered to by the Denver Police Department, they could have at least cited folks or arrested folks for trespassing into an event that wasn't open to them. But that just didn't.
Final question, Sheriff Steve Reams of Weld County, Colorado, who joined us yesterday at the rally. What do you think needs to be done moving forward now to prevent these kinds of incidents from happening? Because this truly was something that should not have taken place. And also, what do you make of the criticism that has been leveled at the rally organizers for not moving the location of the rally that has been the location for now on 6 different occasions going back to July 19th, 2015 to the day it was the 6th annual event that has happened at Civic Center Park in downtown Denver? I mean, earlier when we had Ron McLaughlin on, he was explaining about the challenges of getting insurance for another venue and all these other hoops, in addition to the fact that this is the place that we have been for now 6 different years. And the idea that we're supposed to move this event because thugs are going to be causing this kind of chaos, that doesn't sit well with a lot of people.
Well, to address the first question, I think what you need is a leadership change in the city and county of Denver, and honestly in much higher levels of office in the state of Colorado. I hope people watch those videos. I hope people go to their downtown area and understand that these are the results of the votes that they've cast for those people who are making the decisions about this rally, and on a bigger picture, what's happening in the downtown Denver area. Elections have consequences. As far as what could Denver have done to make this safer or prevent this from happening, or what could we have done? They could have denied the permit. I mean, if they really believe they couldn't provide a safe venue, then that's the action that should have been taken. If you can't enter into a contractual agreement to provide a venue and make it safe, then you shouldn't issue the permit. Instead, they've tried to put it back on the organizer and say it's his fault for not establishing a safe venue. Well, that's a complete failure on the city and county of Denver, and they should be held accountable for it, quite frankly. There were people that got injured yesterday because of a lack of forethought or a lack of action by the city and county of Denver.
Yeah, and I want to put up one of those pictures. Earlier we talked with Ron McLaughlin, lead organizer of this event. This is a man who had put together an event for the 6th time in Denver, 12th time total, that has always been, it's been a family affair, Sheriff Reams. I know you've been to these in the past. These have been occasions for people to gather together, enjoy some music, to share in an experience showing support for our law enforcement. And okay, you may disagree with the message, fine, but you don't whack a guy in the head with a longboard.
I guess the right to peacefully assemble only belongs to those that want to claim that they're doing something on behalf of a thing that we don't necessarily agree with. If you're Antifa, yeah, you can exercise your First Amendment rights, but no one else can. And I know there were numerous groups that were represented there yesterday, the protester groups, but the person who swung his longboard at the event organizer, he was no doubt an Antifa member. I watched him out through the crowd and saw him show up with the skateboards, which are their weapons of choice, because they can look innocent and turn them into weapons. It's disgusting. It's terrible to know that kind of activity, that kind of action is allowed to exist, and it's permeating more and more areas in the downtown area of Denver. And someone's got to get control of it. If the Denver Police Department, the city and county of Denver, if the governor, if they're not willing to weigh in and fix the problem, at some point it's going to put citizens at risk, and they're going to take action into their own hands.
You can notice in this picture I took there that looks like,
Yep.
skateboard there. And I don't know if that was the particular guy or if there were others, but that's an example of a weapon of choice that they like to use, is that kind of something that you're supposed to be playing and having fun with a skateboard and a longboard, not brutalizing somebody else with it. But it's just it's sad what happened. But we all get to see on display what these people are about, and get, I think, a better understanding truly that there's nothing, at least for those that showed up and perpetrated this kind of violence and disruption, there's nothing genuine that they are trying to accomplish, Sheriff.
Other than just absolute terrorism. I mean, what we saw yesterday, to me, absolutely qualifies as domestic terrorism. When they won't allow people to peacefully assemble and speak their own opinions. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time as a nation. Outside of this rally, people have always had the ability to just peacefully assemble and speak their mind. You don't always have to agree with them, but respecting each other's ability to say what you need to say and redress your grievances. That's always expected to be done in a peaceful manner.
Exactly. And it was not yesterday in Denver, Colorado. Sheriff Steve Reams of Weld County, Colorado. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your vantage point from yesterday's pro-police rally, Colorado.
Thanks for being there, Jimmy, and thanks for having me on.
You bet. Thank you, sir, and keep up the good work in Weld County. Sheriff Steve Reams joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. You just watched a clip from Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't miss more engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel today. You want to catch our live show, and I love your support.
I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of no sense.